Okay, hi Year 10, welcome to your introduction videos. This week we're going to be looking at sequences and finding nth terms of various types of sequences. Now, I know I say this a lot, this is an extremely important topic, okay? Sometimes topics are important because they will come up again and again and again. You know, when you do IB, you're really going to need to know them. This is not important for that reason. You know, once your IGCSE course is finished, much of this you probably won't do. The reason why this topic is super important is because the first question, the investigation question of your paper 6, will almost definitely be a sequences question. So it's bound to come up and it's bound to be tricky. Okay, so we really have to know this stuff. And a lot of it I already expect you to know, okay? So I expect you to be able to find the nth term of what we call a linear sequence, okay? A linear sequence, otherwise known as an arithmetic sequence. And we can identify a linear or arithmetic sequence because the differences between the terms in the sequence are the same. So, for example, with A, we've got gaps of 4. Okay, so the differences are always 4. And then remember, all we do back is remember this is the first term, second term, third term, fourth term. We look at what the 0th term is, so go back one in the sequence, and you know, clearly if I have another gap of 4, then that should be 2. So we can now say that the nth term of this pattern is 4n plus 2. So I'd like you to stop your video and see if you can find out the nth term of the other patterns and sequences. Remember D and E, be careful because those patterns are descending, they are not ascending. And then see if you can answer these 3 questions here. Okay, stop your video and have a go. Okay, so here are the answers. Okay, because D and E are descending, then we have a negative coefficient of n, okay? But the patterns, you know, the way you do it remains exactly the same. We look for the difference. Well, the difference is we're subtracting 3 each time, and then go back one in the sequence. You know, clearly it's got to be 20. So minus 3n plus 20. Nothing changes, okay? It's when it's a descending sequence is when you guys typically get it wrong. Otherwise, I think you find this quite easy. Now, what we can use that information to our advantage. So, for example, question 1: what is the 50th number in the sequence A? Well, that should be quite easy. The 50th number, what we'll call U50. Okay, the 50th number is going to be equal to 4 times 50 plus 2, which is going to be equal to 202. So I can straight away know what the 50th number in that pattern is going to be. For sequence E, what position is number negative 2080? Let's just delete some space here. So we can use the nth term. So E has nth term minus 3n plus 20. So we're basically saying when is that term, minus 280, when is that equal to the nth term? And now we just got an equation to solve. Take away 20 from both sides. Minus 300 equals minus 3n. So n must be equal to 100 to divide both sides by minus 3. So the number minus 280 is in the 100th position. Okay. Does 112 appear in sequence A? Explain how we know. Well, let's just do the same thing as we did for the last question, but for sequence A. We're saying, is 112, can that be equal to 4n plus 2? So let's try and solve that. We're going to get 4n equals 110. Divide both sides by 4. 110 divided by 4 is equal to n is equal to 27.5. Well, what does that suggest? That suggests that 112 does not appear in this sequence because you're getting n as not an integer. For a number to appear in a sequence, then n has to be an integer. Okay, so these are all things I expect you to know from years 8 and 9 when I've taught you this stuff. Okay, now I even taught you a little bit about some of these other sequences here. Okay, so we've got 4 types of sequences here and 4 words that would describe these sequences. Now, the first thing you want to do to discover what type of sequence you have is look at the gaps. Okay, now these gaps, you have 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. Because the gaps are always the same, this is my arithmetic sequence. Okay, this is my arithmetic sequence, or linear. Okay, let's do the same for the second one. What's the gap? That's 9. That's 4. That's 15, isn't it? That's 21. That is 27. You'll notice this time the gaps are not equal. So let's check the gaps of the gaps. Well, the gaps of the gaps, the differences of the differences, it's always 6. Now, if it takes you 2 layers to get to a common difference, so the gaps are the same, then that must be a quadratic sequence. Quadratic sequence. Okay? And now let's look at the third one. Let's look at the gaps. That's how do I go from -6 to -4? Let's add 2. -4 to 10 is add 14. Then it's 32. Then it's what, 56. Then it's, well, let's just use a calculator, save time. 184 minus 98 equals 86. Now let's look at the gaps of the gaps. That's going to be 12, then 18, then 24, then 30, then it's going to be 6, 6, 6. So that took 3 levels to get the gaps to be the same. If it takes 3 levels to get the gaps to be the same, then you've got a cubic sequence. A cubic sequence, okay? Now what about this one here? Let's just have a look at this. The gap is 3, the gap is 6, the gap is 12, the gap is 24, the gap is 3, the gap is 6, the gap is 12, the gap is 3, the gap is 6. You see what's going on here? It never seems to happen. Okay, the gaps are 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 the gaps, never actually the same as each other. And actually, this one's much easier to spot what's going on. Hopefully, what you notice this time is what we're doing is we're multiplying by 2, multiply by 2, multiply by 2, multiply by 2. Okay, so this is a different kind of sequence altogether. Okay. And this is what is known as a geometric sequence. Geometric sequence. And that is what you get when, to go from one term to the next term, you multiply by the same number each time. Okay? Got nothing to do with adding or subtracting this time. You're multiplying by 2. So the first thing you do when you get a pattern of numbers, a sequence of numbers, the first thing you have to do is try to identify what type of sequence you've got. And in your IGCSE course, you're going to have arithmetic, quadratic, cubic. You might even get what's known as quartic. It's the 4th level, okay? But if you're getting that, you're definitely going to be using a calculator. Quintic would be a 5th level. Then you've got geometric series, where it's nothing to do with differences. It's you've got what is known as a common ratio. You're multiplying by the same number each time. So you need to look at your sequence and identify what type of sequence you have before you do any work. That is always the very first thing you do. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video and part 2 to come.